Hey YouTube, welcome to another episode of Thinking Fast with Lucky Haskins. I'm not sure if I'm thinking fast as I usually am. This is beer number 13, which it's not because I'm keeping track of how many beers I'm drinking that I know that this is beer number 13. It's because I'm keeping track of how many beers are left. That's how I know it's beer number 13, because I'm thinking fast. But as y'all can tell, I'm thinking about 10% slower than I usually do. But hell, I got a request from my technical director. He requested he needed some thinking fast advice from Lucky Haskins. So, what am I supposed to do? So, this is Thinking Fast with Lucky Haskins, about 10 to 12% slower than normal. But I'm going to tell you, sometimes when you're thinking fast, you have to slow down and think a little slower. Hang on a second, folks. Oh, Lucky wears a lot of hats. A lot of shit to do. All right, so here's a story about thinking fast when sometimes you got to slow down and think slow. You know, I told you all before, I never had no drunk driving, no tickets, no accidents, no nothing like that. Lucky tries to stay out of trouble. Now, I've had my share of trouble, don't get me wrong. But I like to tell stories about all the times I should have got a drunk driving and didn't because I was thinking fast. And I was thinking so fast, I knew how to think slow. So there's this one time I was rolling around, I had me a gosh dang Mercury Grand Marquis. Now that's a fat ride right there, boy, just a floating. So I was cruising around in the Mercury Grand Marquis one night, just rolling from bar to bar, having a good old time. So I go to a bar, have me a couple beers, then I get back in that Mercury Grand Marquis and roll down Telegraph Road, smoke a joint maybe. Get a little further. Now keep in mind, folks, this is back when I wore a younger man's clothes. I was a little out of control, you know. So then I go to another bar, have me another beer or two, maybe a shot or two. Then I get back in that old Grand Marquis and I go ripping down the road a little bit, and you know. Well, I done got pulled over, and of course the officer he comes up to the window and right away he says to me, "Son, are you drinking and driving?" Well, I was thinking fast. I said, "No, sir, I'm mixing it up." Well, he didn't like that, so I ended up in the Lincoln Park jail. I knew I had to think fast, but I was going to have to slow it down 10 to 12%. So there's no problem, folks. I got myself locked up there in the Lincoln Park jail, and these fellas, after a while, come up and they says, "Well, you get to make one phone call." I says, "No, that's all right." Apparently, they don't hear that too often. I says, "Nah, I'm fine." They said, "Okay." These cops all being tough guys. Well, a couple of days went by. Interesting thing about being in a drunk tank in the back of a police station in Lincoln Park, Michigan, is you get all kinds of new fellas each night, which is pretty cool because they all come in all riled up and drunk and high and stoned. And the next morning, they're all hung over and still asleep. Well, I've been in there 2.5, 3 days. That means I get all the donuts and milks and scrambled eggs and all that because none of these guys wake up to get any of that shit when they slide it in. So I was eating good. So I was having a good old time. One day, three, they says, "Hey, Lucky, you got to make a phone call." I says, "Why? Is there some kind of law says I got to make a phone call?" And they said, "Well, you can't just sit here. You got to make a phone call. The judge has set your bail at $500. And I says, "Hell no. You guys don't scare me a bit. But when my old lady finds out that I was driving around from bar to bar in the Grand Marquis, I'm going to get hit over the head with a frying pan. And I'm scared to death of that shit, so I'm going to go ahead and stay here. I ain't calling nobody. Well, apparently this don't happen too often down there in Lincoln Park. Because the next day they came in, after I ate everybody's donuts and eggs and bacon and stuff, and they says, well, hey, Lucky, the judge reduced your bail to $250. Here's the telephone. We need you to call somebody. I said, no, that's okay, man. This is going real good. And they says, well, you can't just sit here. And I said, well, then let me go. No, we can't do that. You need to make a phone call. And I says, no, that's okay. I'm fine. I feel nice and safe here. So eventually they got a little upset and the police were coming around and they was harassing me pretty good. And at one point, two guys came and got me and they took me back to the little phone booth back there in the back of the police department. And they says, Lucky, you're going in this phone booth. And they was all being strong-arm cops because the judge told them to handle it because they was a little pissed I wouldn't leave the jail, evidently. So they stuck me in this little phone booth. Keep in mind, this was back before cell phones. And two cops stood and they said, you're not getting out of that phone booth until you make a phone call. And I says, fair enough. So I got in there and I dialed 911. And the operator says, 911, what's the emergency? And I said, well, hell, I'm locked in this phone booth. These two guys are holding me hostage. They got guns. They're acting really pissed off, and I'm pretty afraid. And it was about 5 minutes later that the chief of police came running back into the back of the police department. Said, what the hell's going on back here? Said, I don't know. We got old Lucky Haskins. He ain't thinking too fast. He's thinking about 12% slower than he ought to be. Otherwise, this story would be over. So, needless to say, they took it back before the judge to see if he'd lower the bail. The judge told him, get that sumbitch out of here. So on day 6, they came and said, you go home. And I said, really? Well, what are the charges? They said, there are none. So that was the second time I got out of the drunk driving I should have had, y'all. Because I was thinking fast. Stay true, y'all.